your hormones and how that affects your brain and your emotions. It takes a full year for your body to go back to where it was at before you had a baby. So your hormone levels and for your emotions to go back to where it needs to be.
I really needed this last time, and I didn't realize how important this was to me, whatever it may be.
The parents always check in. Hey, just want to let you know, thank you so much. Um, this is how old baby Johnny is now, and this is what he looks like, and we still talk about you to this day. So having that emotional, physical support during this very vulnerable point in your life is life changing.
Hello and welcome to the LD Aviation podcast. Today we have a really cool separate topic that we're going to talk about. We are going to introduce Together We Thrive Birthing Services, which is all about getting postpartum help, specifically for the aviation industry. And as you all probably know, I just had a baby in October, and I was able to have Chloe come help me. And during the nighttime, which was awesome. She also came during the daytime. And for me, it was a life changer. And I just think more people in the aviation, everybody, but specifically the aviation industry really needs access to this. And I want more people to know about the fact that it exists. So we created a company. It's called Together We Thrive Birthing Services. Our website is Together We Thrive. Birthing.com. Our email address is contact@togetherwethrive.com. Is that right? Is it together? Oh my gosh. Is that Together We Thrive Birthing or is it togetherwethrive.com?
Yes, togetherwethrivebirthing.com.
Birthing.com. Okay. Now we'll go back and back. So our email address is contact@togetherwethrivebirthing.com. So definitely reach out to us if you want to check us out. We're also on Instagram and we're on Facebook, and you can also find us via the LD Aviation LinkedIn site. All of these podcasts are going to be posted both on the LD Aviation website as well as the Together We Thrive website. So find us either place there. And we would love if you would check out our new website and give us some feedback because we're super excited about this new service. So first of all, I wanted to introduce my two very best podcast webinar guests today. And we're going to start with Chloe Garreau. So Chloe helped me, like I said, during the first 3 months of my postpartum. And she came overnight and helped me feed the baby and get some rest. And it was spectacular. It was like the best thing I've ever had. It was awesome. She has been doing this for 9 years, since 2016. And she's just excellent. And she also carries a passion about the postpartum doula services. She also does birthing doula services as well. But she just has a passion for it, and it's so cool. So I'm going to be excited to hear from Chloe. We also have Raquel Story here. And Raquel has worked with Chloe. She's been doing birthing services postpartum doula services for 5 years now. She came from the medical field, though. So she used to work with babies and heart transplants, which is pretty cool, but probably very difficult. So we're going to talk to Raquel as well. Raquel's also a yoga instructor, so very cool there. That's awesome. Anyway, welcome, Chloe and Raquel. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here.
Cool. So what topic are we going to
thank you so much.
Tackle today?
We are going to tackle planning for your postpartum. So often when we're having a new baby, we spend a lot of time for the actual birth, right? So we're thinking about what we need. We're getting our bodies ready. We're spending a lot of time in that prenatal, like before baby is with us, but we're not thinking as much what we should be planning for when it comes to our postpartum. So we're going to be introducing, talking about our postpartum and planning for that. And Chloe and I were discussing what are like the top four things or the top thing that we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about planning for our postpartum. And we decided that one of the things that we really need to consider is our parental leave. So parental leave, our postpartum bodies, our new bodies, our parental leave, our postpartum bodies, our new baby, and our new normal. So all of
Awesome.
those are going to
All right.
change when we have a new baby.
All right. Great. Thank you, Raquel. That's going to be great because all of those things are
So
things sometimes we don't think about. We think about the birth part of it and we think about what type of clothes we should have and, the hospital we're going to perhaps, but we don't really think so much uh, after the baby's born. Cool. So,
absolutely.
yeah, tell me about what you guys usually see in parental leave, especially here in the US, which can be a lot different than other countries.
Yes. So starting with considering our parental leave, we want to talk about how much the standard leave in the United States is. So, unfortunately, in the United States, we do not have like a federal law of how much leave we get. So, typically, the standard leave in the United States is anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks for the birthing person. So, that is a very short amount of time that you have with your baby to establish all these new changes that are happening with you. So, when we think about our parental leave, we also want to think about the fact that with the birthing person, it takes anywhere for your body to heal. So, anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks for your uterus, just your uterus and your vulva area to heal. So, when we're thinking about our parental leave, we definitely want to take in consideration if you're the birthing person, our healing process. If you are one of the support people, so maybe you have a partner, a husband, a wife, anybody else that are going to be in that support team, you also want to consider their parental leave as well so that we can better optimize how much care the birthing person can get as for healing and then how much care we can spend on our new baby, which is obviously going to need a lot of care as well. Um, Chloe, do you have anything to add to why the parental leave is probably the most important thing that we need to consider when we're thinking about our
It's
postpartum
good to
periods with our baby?
consider the I guess the maximum that you could possibly take and how you would divvy it up. So sometimes, depending on the state you live in, there is sometimes like unpaid family leave that you can add on as an option, especially if somebody was having a longer healing time. Or I have heard of situations where partners can break up their leave too. So sometimes they might take some in the beginning and then divvy it up for maybe when the baby is older, but that might change based on healing and recovery and getting to know your baby and their needs. Um, Also, we noted that a lot of friends and family usually come and do daytime support in those first 2 weeks, but and it's very concentrated, helpful help. But then, like we said, it takes 6 to 8 weeks for just the postpartum body to heal. So, what do you do for the remaining time? And so, it's nice to think about your leave in that picture, and so your well-meaning friends and family can be divvied up, hopefully, over a more extended period of time.
A longer period, you're right. That makes
Yeah.
sense. I find it really fascinating that 6 to 8 weeks for just the uterus part to heal. Like, we haven't even talked about the fact that maybe you're trying to nurse and do all these other things. And some people are having to go back to work before this is even completed. And what a I don't know. That must be
Right.
very miserable. I know we're all really towards career driven and work driven and stuff, but yeah, clearly these rules need to be updated.
For sure. It just because even on a best day, somebody who, is in their early 20s having a baby with no complications, it still takes 6 weeks. If you have somebody who's, you know, older, more like in their late 30s into their 40s, their healing looks different and takes longer. And considering that is very important.
And that is just talking about
Right,
the physical healing, right? And so we're not even talking
right.
about the emotional and the mental healing. We don't like to say this because you now have this beautiful person, this beautiful baby in your life, but your body and your mind and your inners have gone through a trauma, right? And so even if this trauma has given you this most beautiful gift, your body has gone through a lot. And so your body is still processing, not only physically, but in that emotional and that mental sense of what's going on with you. And the stats on your hormones and how that affects your brain and your emotions, it takes a full year for your body to go back to where it was at before you had a baby. So your hormone levels and for your emotions to go back to where it needs to be, or where it was previous to having your baby. And then if you're having
Sure.
multiple children on top of that, you're just kind of not yourself
And
for
that
a
goes into a
while.
whole, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you pointed out the fact that that's just a, semi younger, really a younger, healthy person. If you throw into the picture a C-section or some sort of difficult birth, or like you said, an older mom. I mean, I've certainly was in that category, and it definitely took me longer to heal this time than my first two when I was in my low 30s. So yeah, I mean, just
Yeah,
the C-section part too can be a hugely mental and emotional, uh, long-term issue.
for sure.
Mhm. And since we're talking about our postpartum bodies, I think this is a really great time for us to transition into that thing as we should consider. So the first thing we're considering is our parental leave, and then the second thing is our postpartum bodies. And Chloe's going to go into more depth about
Great.
that.
Awesome.
Postpartum bodies. All right. Well, how are you going to adjust to your recovering body? This is unlike any other type of healing, because unlike a broken arm or a cut, this is something that is internal and sometimes external. And like Raquel touched on, your emotions and your mental well-being also play a part in your body's heal, a very big part in your body's healing. So dealing with being sleep deprived, trying to make milk, having these huge hormone shifts just in these first few weeks, and the physical healing process, not only from vaginal delivery, but also, like we've touched on, cesareans. And it's when someone's having something like a cesarean, sometimes it's planned, but a lot of times it isn't. And so the trauma or the that drastic change in plan and adapting to what you had originally pictured can impact that recovery. The general recommendation for sure, kind of across the board for everybody healing after birth, you want to try to do 5 days in the bed, 5 days on the bed, and 5 days around the bed, which drives everybody a little crazy. It's very hard to be down for the count for 2 weeks, but trying to consider that rest is very important in this healing because where your placenta used to live, now there is a dinner plate sized wound inside you that you can't see, but it will get exacerbated or puts you at risk of infection and all of these things if you don't take the time to literally rest horizontally. And as the households tend to, it's not uncommon for um, birthing parents to also be either a primary parent to other children or to be the manager of the household, so to speak. And so it's really hard to consider delegating that, which we'll talk about in another section.
So tell
Um,
me, are there other I feel like I've heard like in China their standard is usually 40 days that you don't
yes.
really leave the house. Is that yeah,
And
you
you
said
don't really get out of your bed. Like it's the sitting in period in China and some other Asian cultures is very much rooted around keeping the mother and baby very warm and creating a space for healing. So you're surrounded by, usually in these cases, it's like a mother or mother-in-law that comes and lives in with you and makes all your food and takes care of you. Everything you eat is very nutrient dense and really specific nutrients to help with not only your internal healing, but your milk production. And it gives a huge amount of opportunity to bond with your baby, unlike the bounce back culture we have in the US that is not realistic.
And to add on to what Chloe said about how postpartum is handled in other countries, many of those other countries, like we said, Asian culture, and then as well as I believe in Switzerland and Sweden, they also have a part of their insurance plans that
Yes.
do actually provide for that too. So they have these postpartum retreat centers that you go to after your baby is born, where they do help you with that being able to stay in the bed for 2 weeks, but then also with that basic newborn care. Because you have to remember that sometimes we don't actually like, we just give people babies with no license here. You're just like,
Oh
hey,
my
here's
God.
your baby. And you're like, how do I bathe this person? How do I feed this person? Like, there are no rule books in the United States, but in other cultures, they definitely are giving you a little bit more of a basic training, would we say,
And
before you go
hands-on
home with your
when the
little
baby
one.
is here, unlike when we have like childbirth ed or baby, newborn care classes, but you're doing it on a plastic doll, and that's all fine and dandy, but in application your baby moves and has feelings and has their own particular set of needs. And so it's nice to go through that transition with support, which is kind of what our role is in the United States. So it's just being translated differently and in another country, um, which is incredible. But it's one of those things that's like, this is, and like I would kind of touched on earlier, this is healing just in a best case scenario. We're talking you had an uncomplicated delivery, even if you had an uncomplicated cesarean but had to have one, like being ready for unknowns in your postpartum body is also something to kind of factor when you're taking this leave. So things like, if you're having any obstacles in your healing or infections or complications, and these can change that timeline and the system you've surrounded yourself with as far as support goes. So like maybe your mom was going to come and help you for 2 weeks, but suddenly you need her for 6 weeks because something is going on.
mhm.
My personal example is after I had birthed my son, I could not walk more than like 10 feet. And that's not something I could have anticipated for. I was just having searing pain in my pelvis that was making this a huge obstacle.
Uh-huh.
And it was the middle of COVID, so it's not like I could get really super great help beyond that. So it was something that I had to consider. And thankfully, I had um, a system and long enough leave where I didn't have to rush back into work. But
Mhm.
other people don't necessarily have that time frame based on either their jobs or whatever it may be, resource availability and capital to do so, because we live in a very capitalistic society, and that's a
Yeah.
thing to consider too.
Oh my
So,
gosh, I think we should do a whole different webinar just maybe on how do we start to change that culture and perhaps how do we even lobby for longer um, time off or specific rules
oh
saying that
yeah, that
we should get time
that's a
off.
good one for another.
Mhm.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
Several probably.
Oh, I totally agree. And with, not only for the birthing
Mhm.
people, but then also the support people. I know we always talk about, I happen to be a millennial. And so we talk about how millennials get a lot of like, we get pooped on a little bit, but millennial dads really want to, like, millennial males tend to really want to be in their kids' lives, and they often don't get enough leave either. So, they're trying to support their birthing people, but don't have the resources to, because their works are like,
Right.
what did you do? Like, no, you're really keeping this person sane.
Absolutely.
This
Yeah,
other person sane.
that's a very good point. And I would assume, I mean, a lot of
Um,
the companies, perhaps in there that are owned right now, are probably owned by a bit older people who perhaps have not
Sure.
experienced that, and it's harder for them to understand how important it is. But I love that things are changing. Some companies are starting to
Yeah.
allow it and or provide for it. It may not be long, but um, yeah, I guess that comes down to the same lobbying. How can we lobby to get that support person too?
Yeah, the best
mhm,
I've ever seen was a partner got
absolutely.
parental leave, and it was up to 12 weeks that you could take within the first year of the baby's life. So they didn't have to take it all at once. They could break it up. And what the family did that I saw had this, they took the first 4 weeks off together, and then the parent, the non-birthing parent, went back to work. The birthing parent took the rest of their leave, and then the when the birthing parent went back to work, the non-birthing parent took their leave. So it ended up being they could be home with their baby for close to a year, just shy. I believe it was like 8 months or something like that, the way that it divvied up. And I was like, that's incredible. And that takes into consideration childcare, which is a topic for another time,
Yes. Oh,
and what that
yeah.
looks like.
Great. Great. Okay, so postpartum body. Sorry, I got down a different track there, but I think
No,
it
that's
was
okay. I think there's one more slide for postpartum body.
okay. I'm
Mhm.
gonna figure out.
Yes.
And Lindsay, you're right. All of these topics individually, like, we're kind of speeding through this, but almost all of these can be its own, you know, 45-minute to hour long conversation talk point, because they are very hot button issues, and they all have some uh, things behind it that should honestly just, like, everyone deserves to be able to have that bonding time with their child. Like, everybody deserves these things. Like, they should be
Right.
inalienable
Mhm.
rights.
They
I
absolutely
think
should be.
we could, and then we'll cut this part out here, but we could record anytime y'all had an hour. We wouldn't even have to spend that much time. We could spend an hour and take one topic, and the more of these that we spit out, the better it'll be anyway. We'll get better at it too. Um, so, I mean, I could record once a week if we wanted to keep on going with, new topics. So,
Well, yeah, there's so much to talk about, and we already kind of talked about inviting, specialists in some of those topics to come and chat with us. Would
totally.
be really cool too,
Yeah,
just to shed
totally.
a different perspective
Yeah. Yep.
for
Okay.
sure.
Postpartum
So,
body. Okay, I'll let you
postpartum
go.
body. Yeah, so prioritizing your mental health during this transition, those hormones, I would say some of the biggest shifts are in those first couple of weeks, but they can happen anytime in the following 2 years. I personally remember that it was kind of like this heaviness lifted right when, like, within days of my kids turning 2. It was like, oh hey, I feel closer to myself than I have in almost 3 years, because pregnancy was a whirlwind too. So having experienced it myself, and I hear from other parents that around that time is when they start to, you know, kind of come out from under the heavy feeling of their mental health being impacted by their hormones from having birthed a baby. And
Yeah.
that's a long time to consider that you're just going to kind of go back to normal after 6 weeks on a good day. Like,
Right.
so it's wild to me that it takes that long. Prepping your partner and support people for what your needs may be. When you're in the thick of it, some people make rash decisions that they may regret later. My, you know, one of my examples is somebody that, let's say they wanted to exclusively breastfeed but had to pivot from there, but didn't think about what types of formulas they might want to introduce or what type of pump they might want to use or things like that. Like those are things that are nice to kind of at least research and have some clarity on ahead of time, and talking with your partner about what sort of things you would consider helpful. Like, can you wash bottle parts and, maybe set up whatever it may be, maybe consider getting, certain equipment if you did have to, like a baby brezza or things like that to try to make that transition smoother. But you don't have to necessarily purchase any of those things or be prepared for it if that's not your original plan. But knowing that that might be your preference in that scenario, having those hard conversations ahead of time, please.
And may I add on to when you're talking about prepping your partner and your support people for that postpartum period? I will say that in that section right there, because you can't always anticipate your needs, that is where, because we live in a capitalistic society, where we end up kind of
Oh, yeah.
blowing a lot of money, right? So we have a marketing in this country where it's like, oh, buy this
Yeah, that
thing
doesn't.
and this will happen. And so, in this postpartum period where we're sleep deprived, where our hormones are shifting, where our bodies are healing, and we're trying to figure out all these new things, that's when we're most susceptible for
Yes.
those buy this and this will happen. And so, this is where we see. In our field, where we see a lot of families kind of blow a lot of money
Yeah.
that they probably
And
could have
fail.
kept for for purchasing a doula for us
Yes.
versus buying like some item that says, oh, if I buy this item, my kid is going to sleep through the night. Oh, if I buy this item, my baby's all of a sudden going to be able to feed at the
Right.
breast or at the chest, this kind of thing. So, preparing for that when we're talking about our postpartum bodies too is honestly, like I said, more preparing for that mental state
Yes,
that you
those rash
can't
decisions
is
are real.
variable.
It's almost like they're almost like desperation purchases, and it's just because you read a thing, someone recommended something, you have an obstacle that you're like, I don't know how many more nights or days I could deal with this. And it's like, it's okay to make some of those purchases, but it's nice to kind of either have an advisor or somebody that can guide you in that direction, or that you already did some research on scenarios, right? And had maybe some preferences of things that you could do. Like the prep should be more research than bulk purchasing or trying to get stuff for free or your friends pawning stuff off on you because they're done with it. It's like then you just accumulate stuff and usually don't need a whole lot of stuff.
I think that's a really good point. My first two, I mean, they were super well meaning people, and I didn't know better.
Right,
Gave
because
me so many cool
nobody does.
things. Yeah, and it was overwhelming then. It was just too many
Sure.
gadgets and clothes and stuff that I didn't need. It was too much focus on that. And then I should have just spent time, you know, making that bond with the baby instead. That's a
Totally.
good
But
point.
it's hard, it's hard to, when that's all you see, right? Again, this goes into your mental health. When all you see are the beautiful Instagram nurseries, thinking that's all the stuff that you need and all the, that's the sort of preparation that you need to do. Instead, it's what can I do to convince myself to be in bed for 2 weeks? And what could my baby actually need? Probably diapers of some kind and things to keep them warm. That sounds good. It's
Yep.
pretty much it. Because we'll talk about feeding your baby in another section.
All right.
Um, I already touched upon mobility from my own experience, but that's something to consider. I've had people after cesareans or harder labors or long pushing stages that have issues with their mobility after, and how quickly they are able to get back to moving around or being able to hold their baby for long periods of time as they gain weight, because that's their whole job. It's hard to anticipate. So that's something where it's like good to have a baseline of support, but maybe reach out and do like a in case I needed that type of scenario to consider as well, because of the unknowns.
Yeah.
And to add into this last kind of point in our postpartum bodies is also to remind yourself that as the birthing person, you are not checked on by a medical provider until after 6 weeks. So, whereas once you have delivered your baby in whatever way that happens, your baby is going to probably be checked on at least maybe 2 to 3 times before you are ever seen by another medical provider. And so some of the postpartum complications that come up, it is your responsibility, which sounds crazy, and I'm going to repeat it again. It is your responsibility to catch those. And so, whereas you're already tired, you're already not there mentally, and you're already trying to figure out this new person, and all your focus is on your new baby, on your new person, you're not sometimes you're neglecting your care, and you're not catching signs that can let you know that something is very,
Sure.
very wrong. So in particular with clients that are 35 and up or 30 and up, we have this thing called preeclampsia. And we think about that mostly in the pregnancy period, but it can happen postpartumly. It can happen within the first 40 days of your pregnancy or after your postpartum. And it is very, very hard to catch because the signs of postpartum preeclampsia are fatigue.
Headaches.
Their
Like,
headaches. So all these things that you generally, they're a little bit of maybe water weight, which if depending on how you're pregnant or how your delivery went, you might already have because maybe you have fluids during your delivery period. And so the markers of postpartum preeclampsia are not things that you just like, you're like, oh, I have a headache. Oh, I'm tired. They're just things that come on with just having a new baby. And so um, there's that stat that 1 in 4 people of color die either prenatally or postnatally, like right after having their baby. And that stat, a good portion of that stat is because these
yep,
people are dying silently at home from postpartum preeclampsia. And I had that. Um, and I was because of what we do, I was very hyper
Mhm.
vigilant. I was taking my blood pressure a lot and doing those kinds of things that you wouldn't know to do if you didn't. And I even had postpartum preeclampsia, and I knew all the signs and
right,
still was not worried, right? And when I finally did go into the hospital and was readmitted, my blood pressure was 180 over 100, and
right,
I could have sat home and
yep,
died because I was just hanging out with my baby, and I felt like, of course I'm tired, of course I don't feel good, but if I didn't know that extra step to be looking for that and really monitoring that, I would have just sat home and been home with my family and passed away. And so that's happening a lot in American homes, not across the globe, in American homes, because we of how we do our postpartum care for the birthing people. So also really taking in consideration, nobody's checking on you. They're checking on
yeah,
the
So
for
baby.
that
having that
amount
Nobody's
of
checking
time.
support person that knows
Yeah,
those signs is really important.
yeah, absolutely. And that's, this
absolutely.
is the standard of care in the US is a hospital setting. So in the flip side, those that do have out of hospital births, midwife scope of practice, they check on you so frequently that those things are caught more readily, you know, more often. But in a scenario, a more common scenario, it's exactly how Raquel has spelled that out. And I would say postpartum preeclampsia and retained placenta are the two that you see that you kind of just feel crummy
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, well, I just was awake for 2 days, then pushed a cute watermelon out of me, and I feel crummy because I'm exhausted and have to feed a person and make milk. And so all of those factors, right, in dealing with your healing postpartum body, it's so easy to overlook things that are indeed really serious complications that could be a life or death situation. And it is such a shame that our country doesn't recognize the need for this level of care to be readily available.
And if you're unaware of these potentials, then you don't know how to advocate for yourself. So, I mean, you can call the physician and or your medical provider and say, "Hey, I'm feeling these things." They most likely will tell you like, "Oh, well, you just had a new baby. It's okay. Call us back in a couple days if you're still feeling this way." And most of the time, you don't have a couple days in these situations.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, even for myself, I called my
Yeah.
physician. They told me I was probably fine. I knew better, so I took myself to the hospital. And when I got there, they were like, "Oh, we're going to admit you ASAP." Like there was no once they took the blood pressure, they were like, "Oh," they sent me straight to the back, like in front of everybody, took me back, hooked me up.
Right.
But I knew to advocate for myself. And so most people don't know to do that. And so that's like the sad part of that
Yeah.
postpartum period where it's so
Yeah.
dangerous in our country. And
Yeah.
that could be a whole like
Right. It
podcast in
really
itself,
can.
right?
Right. Things to look for in your postpartum, specific things to look for. Yeah.
Well, you know,
Great.
doing warning signs for postpartum and warning signs for baby, I think is a great topic
All right.
for future.
Man, we're like all sorts of them here.
Mm.
I'm trying to rotate this camera the different way.
So
So
next we're going to talk about new baby. Hooray, you're going to bring a new baby home. All the things you have, there's so many things to consider. Take it away, Raquel.
Oh, new baby. And so when we're thinking about our new baby, typically I would say like the top three things we're thinking about is how we're going to feed our baby, how we're going to clothe slash diaper our baby, and how are we going to do newborn sleep. So how are we going to where how's that sleep transition? And so when we're considering those things, we need to consider what our feeding plan is. And typically, people are going to choose between breast or chest feeding and formula. Um, and sometimes we're going to do a combination feed based on what our babies may need. When we're thinking about and we're considering our feeding plan, we want to consider the items that we might need around that feeding plan. So if we're planning to do bottle feeding or formula feeding, we're going to need bottles, right? If we're planning to do exclusive breastfeeding, then maybe we need something like a breastfeeding pillow, or maybe we need a nipple shield because maybe our baby doesn't have a great latch. And then if we're planning to do any pumping so that our baby continues to get human milk, then we're going to need the equipment to do that. Um, Also, when we're thinking about that, we want to think about some of the complications that can come up with feeding. So, if our baby needs a or a baby has a lip tie or a tongue tie and needs revision, that's extra money. If we need a lactation consultant, so somebody who specializes in helping to feed your baby, and then just like formula, right? Like formula in this country, there is a billion different kinds, and like what formula do we want to use? Does our baby have a tolerant or lactose intolerance and things like that? And so when we're thinking about feeding, that's really a whole world of things that we really need to be considering. Um, then when we keep on going, we're going to think about where our baby is going to sleep or what sleep training or sleep that we want to do. So, and often our choices are to have our baby room in with us. So they're in the same room with us, that they're in their own bassinet or some type of carrier or safe sleep place. Um, some people decide to have their baby's room in their own room. And then some people choose to co-sleep, right? And in the United States, we have pretty divisive opinions between where your baby should sleep and why they should sleep where they are. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends baby sleeping in your room for up to 6 months. They they discourage co-sleeping, which is a thing that happens all across the country, or all across, in other countries, which, other countries, their babies are safe. And then, and then baby moving out of the room after 6 months. And then diapering, when we're thinking about diapering, one of the things that we want to think about is cost, right? Um, Cloth diapering tends to be a diapering system that costs a lot up front. But then on the back end, it does not cost as much because you're not having to upgrade diapers as much. You're not going to have to do a lot of things that are like when you're doing disposables, your diapers change, sizes change often. Um, but when you're thinking about cloth diapering, you got to think about the cleaning, right? So uh, do you have a time to be cleaning cloth diapers all the time? Can you afford a diapering service if you don't have the time to do the laundry that comes with cloth diapering? So when we're thinking about that, we're thinking about the expenses that we have in regards to diapering as well. And with diapering too, in particular with disposable diapers, um, some all babies' bodies are
Yeah.
different. So sometimes your Pampers brand might not fit on your baby because your baby might have, I don't know, skinny thighs or something. Or so often we're playing a lot with a couple different brands when it comes to disposables. And so sometimes you have it in your mind, like, yes, I'm just going to get the Kirkland Costco brand diapers. And then you get those diapers and maybe they're not the best fit for your baby. And now you have 3,000 diapers for no reason that don't fit your baby. And so, so some of this planning when it comes to now having our new baby is we need to do that planning once our baby's here because your baby has their own preferences. Like I said, with a diaper type, your baby has their own shape to their body, which can affect which diapers they have. When we're talking about bottle feeding, um, some babies take certain bottles better than they take other bottles, right? And so when we're thinking about, and this is, I think, a mistake that I see most often, families will go and get a bunch of bottles, but it'll be the same type of bottle. So they'll just go get one brand of bottle and they'll get like 15 of them. And then their baby comes and they're trying to give them that baby that bottle. And um, that baby's not taking that bottle because that bottle doesn't work well with their oral development. And so, knowing that sometimes you're going to have to pivot, right? When we're talking about bottle feeding, when we're talking about diapering, because now we have this little human that has opinions. Like, believe it or not, they have opinions. My daughter decided that she didn't want to nurse anymore. There was no reason. She had no oral issues, nothing like that. She just decided she had a bottle once. She realized she could get that milk faster, and she was like, and I don't have to work as hard. She was like, give me that
Right.
bottle. I want a bottle, right? So sometimes your babies are smart. They're going to figure things out. And then also, if you're having feeding issues, things like doing triple feeds and things like that, you have to consider the time that that might take or the equipment that that might take as well. And so when we're talking about planning for new baby, we've talked about when I'm counseling my families, I want them to think about what is their priority. So if it's your priority is having your baby have human milk. What ways are we going to get human milk? Are we going to go through a donor? Are we going to be able to pump and do that? What is your priority? And then thinking about the options that go
That's a great
around
way of
that.
positioning it.
So, yeah. So I don't know if you have anything to add in there. One of the things we
Take a
do
newborn
say is
care
like
class
take a
at
newborn
least.
care
Yeah.
class. Like just take one. Just take it. There are things that come up when it comes to your new baby that you're not thinking about right away. Maybe it's just something as easy as bathing your baby, when to bathe your baby, how to bathe your baby, what you bathe your baby
Yeah.
in. So like right there, I was just like
Where
boom,
would
boom,
you,
boom, boom.
oh, sorry, Raquel. I
But
was just
that
going to say,
is
where would you suggest families go to find those classes? Is it just a Google search?
hmm So you can do a Google search, and that can help you come up with newborn care classes that might be in your area. If there's a pregnancy center that's in your area that gives classes, a lot of times they will offer a class. If you hire a doula, which obviously we are going to be talking a lot about what doulas do and why to hire them. Doulas often give newborn care classes, and in a lot of places where you're going to birth your baby offer some type of newborn care class too. And in those newborn care classes, they're hitting the basics, they're hitting the sleep, they're hitting the feeding, they're hitting how to dress your baby properly based on the weather, they're hitting what room temperature the house should be for now you have this new baby. And so they're hitting a lot of those um, big safety points, I guess I would say, around baby and signs to look out for what your baby might be going
Okay.
through if it's going, like if,
Okay.
things to be worried about. Um, and a lot of times you can get those classes through your insurance if you have
Okay.
private insurance as well. And then lastly, with preparing for your baby, this is a new thing that I am super passionate about is car seat safety. So I think the stat is more than 40% of parents install their car seats incorrectly. And so make sure that you're getting the car seat safety classes as well. Those are free. All you have to do is go on to the Department of Motor Vehicles um, in your state. You Google car safety, and they will come up with the car safety um, classes that are in your area. They are free. They are normally 30 minutes. They will help you install your car seat. They will show you how to do it. They will take it apart. They will show you how to get your baby in, how to get your baby out, how to make the adjustments to your car seat. So when your baby is growing, how to, elongate the back, how to, get the feet. They will do all of that stuff, which I think is so important because often the first exposure that we have with our car seats
Mhm.
is when we're bringing our baby home. And,
Yep.
it is too late by then. Like you're just going to deal with what you have. And so they're going to show you all the safety features on your particular car seat and things to do for that. And like I said, those classes are free. They're often offered at your fire station, but when you get on the website site, they'll let you know where you can get that class at, and it's like
That's
30
awesome.
minutes. I took it, I learned a bunch, and I thought I knew everything. So 100% take a car seat safety class because
We're all doing
we're
it
doing it
wrong.
wrong.
Yeah, mine was at the fire station, like you said. Yeah, the fire station put it together. I think they do it once every couple of months for people in the area.
Yeah, it's worth it.
That's that's
It's
great.
worth it.
Yep.
I know there's one more new baby slide,
And it's
and
free.
it's free. I
Yeah,
think we've
love
talked
free.
about a lot of this already, but um,
Oh, consider using your registry properly. That's what we forgot on the other thing. But with our registries, a lot of times with our registries, we focus on the things that are like really fun for babies. So like clothes, toys, things like that. But let's be practical about our registries. Doulas can help you do your registry. One of the most practical things that you can do is with, in particular, with diapering, get yourself, put lots of different sizes on
Yeah.
there. Like, um, my baby is 6 months old right now. We put multiple different sizes of diapers on our registry. So we're still using diapers from our
Good.
registry, right? Because we made sure to do multiple different sizes for as she's growing. It is great to have those multiple different sizes of diapers if you're doing disposables because your babies, I swear, one day they go to bed one size, you wake up and all of a sudden they're blowing out of that diaper. And so it's nice to already have that in your house. Another way that we can utilize our registries is also putting like doulas on your registry, or childcare on your registry. It's something that we did so that we were able, even as a doula, I had a birth doula and I had a postpartum doula. So it was something that we put on our registry so that we could afford that expense, right? It is not, unfortunately, insurance often doesn't cover doulas. And so, putting that on your registry, putting lots of different kinds of bottles, lots of different kinds of pacifiers. Like we said, your baby has opinions. Um, so maybe what you think your baby should want is not what they want. And so utilizing that registry in a particular way is so, so vital for that new baby stage. Also, picking your pediatrician. Pick your pediatrician, interview with your pediatricians before your baby is born. People don't think about this. They're just like, I'm going to go with whoever is assigned with me. But it is super important that you are aligned with your pediatrician and your pediatrician is aligned with how you want to do your child's care. Chloe shared a very beautiful story about how she actually drove. Like
Yeah,
what was it,
yeah.
two
I drove
hours, an
almost two
hour to
hours
see
to
your
go to the
pediatrician?
pediatrician that I wanted us to go to when they were really little.
Yeah, because they were aligned with how she wanted to do
Yeah.
her child's care. The worst thing is to go into your doctor's office, you say something about how you're caring for your child, and they look at you
Yeah.
like you
No, it's
are
true.
nuts.
Anytime you're going to do
That
something
happened to me
outside
recently.
of the traditional norm or the pediatrician's recommendations, it is your appointment focus becomes less about your child and more about being reprimanded because you're doing something that either isn't backed by enough research or is going against the grain. So, depending on your parenting priorities, like kind of decide what those are ahead of time. And it's okay if you pivot and change, obviously, but there were certain things that were very important to me as a new parent, and I purposely sought out a pediatrician that our appointments were delightful and they were all about the baby and focusing on their well-being and their care. And I didn't get any pushback based on the decisions I wanted to make. I even got more information about some of the decisions I wanted to make, which is excellent. So it was worth it to me. And parents that I work with today as a doula, I find that when they do visit their pediatrician, because like we talked about earlier, you'll see them a couple times in those first couple of weeks, depending on again your parenting priorities. They'll be like, my pediatrician spent the whole time talking about rice cereal, and that's not something that we want to do. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, then maybe find a different pediatrician in that
Yeah.
practice or whatever it may be. But again, it's like it feels like little things, but you're ultimately wasting your time and you're not getting the feedback or the conversation that you're hoping to have to learn more as a new parent.
Mhm. And understanding our medical system in the way that we have
Oh yeah.
biases, in particular based on your race
Oh
or
yeah.
your age or your maternal status. is going to be very, very important because maybe say you're a parent that wants to um, breastfeed or you want to provide your child human milk, right? Um, but you are maybe a person of color. The stats show that and you're having trouble with lactation. So you're having trouble with lactation. The stats in America show that they will not offer lactation consultants unless that person of color asks for them, and that they will push formula before they help you solve maybe
Oh yeah.
the lactation problem. So knowing going on into that in your pediatrician supporting that, right? So a lot of times, and that happened with me, I had some issues with my child latching, right? I told you she just decided that she wanted a bottle one day and never wanted to go back. Um, and my pediatrician literally was like, well, why don't you just do formula and why don't you just give up on that
Yeah.
lactation thing? Um, and so once again, this is where what I do, I have privilege in that because I knew what to do to advocate for myself and advocate for my child. It was important to me for my kid to have human milk. So I got the resources for pumping. And so, but just knowing that that can change and you have these hormones too. So you
Yeah.
feel like an awful person. I cried a lot. And so, yeah, so reminding yourself that who you put in your support team and your village, whether it's your pediatrician, your parents, your friends, your doula, whoever it is, they need to be on the same page in the
Yes.
same book
Yep.
It's
with you.
true. That's the best way to look at it.
Totally true. Yep. Yep. I agree. Great points. Very great points. Yep.
And I think
All right. So our next one is we're going to be talking about the new normal.
Sure. And the disclaimer for the new baby too is that we're just talking about it from a single baby perspective, not a multiples perspective. So if you have multiples, you need to consider some of those things differently, and that can be something we discuss in another episode.
All right. It sounds good. Yeah. So new
New
normal.
normal.
Like, yes, especially for
Yes.
those, well, I guess I'd say especially for first time parents, but adding a second child makes a whole new normal too. And same with any addition of an
Oh, yeah.
additional.
On that, I just had this discussion with
hmm
somebody actually earlier this week where the new normal changes every time you're adding a person into your family and have to go through postpartum recovery in the sense that you're getting to know what your new normal is this time around. Because with every pregnancy you have, you're changed on a molecular level as the birthing parent. And with every single time, and you think it would maybe get easier, but it doesn't. Sometimes it gets harder. Sometimes it's just different, which, is again, you have to learn how to adapt to that. But um, I find that a more jarring, like, yes, it is a shock to have the new normal when you're introducing a first baby, but you also have time with a first baby in the sense that they're the only one that you have to focus on. When you have other children and then you add a new baby, it's a totally different rewiring because you have to think about all of these people. You're just adding another tab to make a permanent tab to think about, right? So that's really fun. So new normal. What does your new normal look like? What does your partner's new normal look like? What does your new family's normal look like? So siblings, pets, roommates, if you have family living with you, like mother-in-laws, sisters, whatever it may be, every time you're adding a person, all of these people are impacted and in different ways. So even though this could be your third, fourth, fifth, 10th baby, you still have to have these discussions with the people that are going to be impacted. Now, obviously, discussing it with like your 2-year old is a little hard, but you're still prepping them for this new presence, right? So figuring out how to prioritize your baby needs and fit in your own as, again, somebody who has to get to know their body all over again. It's like as jarring as puberty, if not, I personally think more jarring, because you're significantly more tired.
Yeah.
Um, self-care is such an important factor for your mental health and therefore your overall healing. And self-care looks very different, let's say 2 weeks in versus 6 months in, but still needs to be considered. So maybe 2 weeks in, it's you get to shower by yourself.
Yep.
Sometimes it's you just went for a walk around the block by yourself or with a pet or just without the baby, but it's just being away for the from the baby for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it may be. Obviously, this depends on things like your chosen feeding plan, your baby themselves and what types of needs they have, but it's really reasonable for you, for your partner, for other adults in your space to want to have a baby break. It's the most reasonable thing I've ever heard. And for the birthing parent themselves, because you also went through such a dramatic, in essence, transformation into being this new parent on this biological level, needing those breaks and kind of scheduling them or having that open communication with your support system of being like, I need time away from the baby and not made to feel guilty or ashamed or anything because you are a human person on earth and need a break. It's
Yeah.
important. Set it up
Totally
and
important.
normalize it.
And
Set, sure.
you were talking about the what does your new normal look like? Um, do you find sometimes like I think maybe it happened to me a little bit. What my new normal, what I thought my new normal was going to look like for their siblings or
Sure.
just in general, didn't necessarily turn out what I thought it was going to be. It
Yes.
changed it up on me.
It's so hard to anticipate what your new normal will look like. And the things like you'll observe obviously other people in your extended network who are adding babies on and people over social media who are showing the really glorified cute version of what it can be, and
Mhm.
you have some that show what their reality is. But again, like, I follow some moms that are trying, some influencer moms that are trying to show some of the more real versions, but they're still edited and they're still their personal experience. So my experience versus each of your experiences is different. Were they all hard? Yeah. Were they all hard for different reasons? Did we all have different babies with different personalities? Older siblings, considering other pets, considering partners, considering, um, you know, other family members that are coming to help support all of these factors. There's so many. There's no way to anticipate any of it.
Yeah.
So just knowing that there will be change, and I find that setting yourself up for success, so setting boundaries with family and visitors and social media and what asking for help looks like,
Mhm.
some of these things can be done ahead of time where you're just opening the line of communication of being like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to need. Or you could be like, last time, if you have previous pregnancies, you could be like, I really needed this last time and I didn't realize how important this was to me, whatever it may be. And
Mhm.
so that's something you can try to prioritize this time around. Might it be as heavy of a factor? Maybe not, but it's good to have that conversation with your your partner or your doula or your in-law or your friend that's helping you, whoever is in the nitty-gritty with you. It's important to start that communication about what asking for help can look like, right? Because when
Exactly.
you're feeling very weepy and taking that whatever it is very personally, or you're trying so hard to, if you're breastfeeding for the first time, for example, you're like, wow, this is very hard for me. And it's like having somebody not use discouraging language and being there to help give you either resources or support is very important. But also it's okay for you to, you know, feel your feelings at them about whatever it may be. So kind of setting up your support people to be those that can save space for you when you are having a hard time. Sometimes you just need to air your grievance, right? So you could just be like, this is really hard. Okay, I'm going to do it again in 10 minutes. I'm just gonna go weep about it for those 10 minutes and I'm gonna do it again. And
Yeah.
that's fine. So it's like you're not necessarily changing your plan, you're just admitting that all of these transitions between your new body, your new baby, your recovering body, your hormone shifts, being sleep deprived, right? All the list of many, many things. It's really reasonable to start that conversation of what asking for help will look like and having, and it could be your partner or your doula or somebody having these check-ins with you. As doulas, we have them very regularly, but if you don't have that type of support, have that conversation with your partner or your family member or friend that's going to help you, because they're the ones that need to be a little more proactive in being like, what do you need help with? And here are some examples that we talked about ahead of time. Do you want me to, take the baby so you can have a break for 30 minutes? Like, don't just be like, what do you need? Because they're not going to know in the moment and not know. It's like they sometimes postpartum, postpartum people freshly in their postpartum have this like, not a blinder, but it's like you're so embedded in this period and so overwhelmed during some parts of that transition that it's really hard to be like, yes, I need these things. So having like some pre-discussed things to check in about and some maybe things that that person can just kind of do to ease your burden while you are on the struggle bus. Great.
Hmm. Hmm.
Have that conversation ahead of time. Don't have it when you're weepy and bulk purchasing things on Amazon because you think you need 200 diapers of one size. Like, don't do that.
So
Just,
And as the support person too, making sure that you're just like I always say, like open your eyes and open your ears, because sometimes you're the birthing person, like Chloe said, is not going to actually know what they need. So, a good example of this is I would say if you're bottle feeding or if you're pumping, right? Like, I always tell people if you have a support person in your life, you should
yeah,
probably never have to wash a bottle or a pump part, right? And I will tell you, as a person who does that for other people, and then as a person who gets that done for me by my partner, the most wonderful thing to do is to just be able to walk up to our little drawer and grab what I need for pumping or for bottle feeding, and then it's clean. It's like a fairy comes through my house, and I'm like,
right.
woohoo! It is ready. Um, Anytime I have to do it for myself, which is funny because I do it for other people for a living. I'm like, oh, dang, this sucks. This is more time that I have to do, right? But it does make such a big difference on how you can allocate your time if the tools that you need are already ready for you. And so as the support person, just being able to open up your eyes, open up to your ears. If you keep hearing your partner say X, Y, and Z, my partner does this thing where he at night when my daughter wakes up for a night feed, he just brings milk up in a cooler, and so now we're not having to go up and down the stairs all night if she decides that she's hungry. We have milk upstairs, and he just does that proactively. It's part of his nighttime routine when he's like shutting down the kitchen. He just automatically makes the milk, puts it in the cooler, and it goes upstairs with us, right? And so I've never said that to him. He just figured it out on his own because he's like, this is a thing that's disturbing our flow. So making sure that you're being
Yeah,
observant of the things that you need, because maybe your partner isn't going to
right.
think to tell you to do those things, or they're not even like realizing like, oh, every night we're waking up at
Right.
2 a.m. and we have to go downstairs and get a bottle for this baby. So just being observant and hearing and listening, and then with other people in the house, in particular siblings and parents, or siblings and pets, giving them grace, right? Because if you have a sibling, they're typically their brain development is not complete, right? And so they might not know how to verbalize the impact that this now new baby is having on their lives. And they're doing things like maybe now they're wetting and they were never doing that before. Or if you have a pet, maybe now they're like super territorial, or they're aggressive. They're telling you what's going on, that this is impacting them, but they don't have the words to do that. And being able to uh, recognize those things when we're talking about our new normal, and being able to pivot those when we're talking about the extra people or
And it's
extra
hard
pets
to
that are in our
anticipate
life.
that those things are going to happen. Like, obviously, your plan was probably not to exclusively pump, Raquel. And so, like, that, your partner being observant enough and taking those things into consideration was able to pivot with you in order to streamline that experience. And so when there is a factor like a sibling or a fur sibling struggling with the transition, it's like nobody needs to beat themselves up. It's just another pivot point of how can we address this obstacle that we did not anticipate. But being aware ahead of time that you're like,
Mhm.
we're going to have pivot moments because that's such a big part of being a new parent to, you know, where did our
Did we lose
internet
Chloe?
go?
Okay. I thought it might have been on my
I
side,
think
but
we lost Chloe.
yep.
Hold on, it
Okay.
says it's connecting.
No. Yeah, it looks like it's Chloe.
Well,
Lindsay, how long did you have
It was really
Chloe
just about
for
a month.
during
I
your
think I had
postpartum?
12 times. And I got lucky because
Okay,
my
gotcha.
kiddo she was a pretty good sleeper. But I was so nervous and I'm single,
Mm,
so I was just so nervous I was never going to sleep ever. And, um, but even though she was a good sleeper, I mean, literally, I cannot say enough good things about having help afterwards. I didn't even know it existed before this.
hmm But that's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, did you have any postpartum care, like via doula with
Two others.
you have
Yep, two
one
others.
other or two other
And so
children?
my oldest is
Okay.
18 and then 15 and then this new one. So the big gap in between.
So it's like starting
Yep. But
over.
no,
Yeah.
I did not have that. And I had family, which family is always well meaning, but it's sometimes hard to adjust the type of care that you need for a family member. Um, and I think it's easier with a doula. So anyway,
And
sorry,
that
Chloe, we
that right
lost you
there could be a
there.
whole podcast, because like our friends and
totally.
family,
Yep.
No, that's okay. My internet cut out. Sorry.
yeah, because our friends and family, like you said, are very well meaning, but maybe they don't know the latest research, or maybe they're just like, I mean, with grandparents, I find this a lot. They'll be like, I did it with you and you're fine.
Yep. Yep.
It's my favorite line. Uh,
Oh, but
I have such a specific example that comes to mind. I will never forget a well-meaning grandparent that was like, yeah, just
Oh, shoot. Oh,
oh
shoot.
no, Chloe, you're frozen.
But that sounds like that hurts, though. That would
Yeah, I don't know what we're rubbing rough
nothing
whatever
rough
on, but I
sounds
don't want to
good
do it.
at all. Nope.
Oh, but it's such a different experience. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
your family is well
I
meaning,
think
but
we
sometimes
totally
they
should
just
talk
don't know.
about that. I think that would be great. And then I like the asking for help. I think
hmm
how do you ask for help? That's part of my problem. I just have a hard like I don't know how to ask for help, and I think sometimes people don't or ask for specific the help that actually is going to help you. Like you can say, yeah, I could use help, but if there's not if it doesn't come in the way that you need, like you touched on, it It's not helpful. I'll move the slide
Hmm.
one more since we're waiting for her to connect. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And then just like, yeah, giving yourself grace and your partner grace because like the emotions are real. Like, I don't know. For me, I don't know if you were able to nurse with your children, but I really had it in my head that I wanted to nurse with my daughter. Um, And I just, and even though, like I said, like this is what I do for a living, so I counsel people on this, but it's different when you're going through it. And I just felt like such a
mhm.
failure that I could not get this baby to nurse. And my partner had to just sit me
Yeah.
down and be like, is she getting
Yep.
fed? And I'm like, yeah.
Mhm.
Is she happy? Yeah. Is
Yep.
she healthy? Yeah. It's like, so we could do it this way. Like, why are we getting upset? Like, why are we so married to the
Hmm.
way that we think things should be versus just like adapting to the things? And I think that happens a lot in the
Totally.
postpartum period,
Yep.
right? So yeah, having a doula or somebody to help. And like Chloe was saying, like with your experiences too, knowing like, oh, I really could have used this in my past
Hmm.
experience with having a child. So with my second experience or my third experience, I want to make sure I have this thing or I need this thing because it
Yep.
would have been nice the last time. Because, yeah, I tell my partner, I'm like, I had a birth and a postpartum doula, but I only had my postpartum doula for a very short period because um, I do birth and postpartum as well. But I just was like, I don't need it. But I didn't
Yeah.
anticipate having to go back to the hospital. So it would have been nicer to have the postpartum doula longer than my birth doula because I ended up being hospitalized without my baby and my partner for a little bit of time. So, but
Yeah.
I couldn't have known that was going to
You
happen.
don't.
Chloe, you're back.
I'm back. Sorry, guys.
We're just getting to know each other.
I love it. I love it. I'm all about it. Here,
Okay.
I
Here
think
you
we
go.
can toggle to the next new normal slide.
All right. There you
And
are.
let's see. Hooray! So, preparing outings in general, it's hard to add a new person who's depends on you that much and then try to leave the house with them and then possibly any other siblings. So, all the baby stuff, the baby's needs, they're always gonna poop or barf or something. Something will happen when you're trying to leave
Yep.
the house, right? Your family's needs just to get out the door and then being out in the world. Like, what type of stuff do you need a stroller? Do you need a carrier? Do you have a car with enough space for all of these things? What your own family's needs, suddenly snacks or traveling with milk or traveling with formula or whatever it may be. There's so many things to consider for outings. So it's really daunting, I find, for most people to leave their house with a new baby and
Hmm.
everybody else that may have to come along. So get adjusting to that and being very kind to yourself in that piece. It's like, just know it will not take 20 minutes to go to Target. It will
Yep.
take 3 hours, and that's okay. And different versions of that. Like, it gets easier, but it's one of those things that it takes practice just like everything else. Um, During this transition of having a new normal, I find that people are going through a mourning process of the life they had prior to baby. And we're just talking like prior to children in general, combined with prior to introducing this baby, because your relationship with your other children tends to change or have to evolve or adapt um, as you're adding beings to your family. So, again, being kind to yourself through this, it's really normal to feel like you're literally mourning who you were prior to what
Sure.
you are that day. Um, and so finding support systems that are for you, finding support systems for your baby and your family, there's all type of, there's like Postpartum Support International is like a larger scale virtual version, but there are parent groups. There's parent and baby groups. There's just exclusively mom or exclusively dad or exclusively partner groups. There's so many out there where they're virtual in person. So I don't love the like find your tribe concept because that's so hard to do in the way that our society is structured today. But you can definitely find systems and outlets that you can bond with or, find a sense of camaraderie and kind of be able to air any parental grievances or mourning, or the flip side of that is celebrating your new life because that's such a big part of this transition as well. You're like, we added to our family. What does that look like for you? So rejoicing those little wins that you have, whether it's baby milestones or milestones for you as a parent, like, I guess one of my personal examples is, breastfeeding was super hard and I super hated it. But for me as a parent, it was such a priority for so many different reasons, cost effectiveness, the bonding that you get from breastfeeding, all of those things were things that I was taking into consideration. And I didn't like breastfeeding, but I did like the bond. And so once we kind of got over some of our hurdles, then it felt very, um, it just felt less overwhelming. I wouldn't say it necessarily felt routine, but the act of breastfeeding became more normalized for me. And so once we kind of got to that point, I was like, yes, this feels more like I'm getting used to it. And so that was a very exciting point for me in my postpartum because it was so
Yeah.
hard leading up to that point. So little wins. Sometimes it's you left the house in 30 minutes instead of an hour. Like, how exciting! Like, we left the house and nobody pooped while we were out. How exciting! So
Yep.
that's
I
fun.
left the house and
Things
only
like
went through
that,
one outfit instead of the two that yes, that's been me lately.
right?
Yep.
Little wins. So those are all very important. It's okay to celebrate all of them. We, my partner and I celebrate things like it's mostly kid milestones, but I was so excited the minute everybody in our house was potty trained. It's
Yeah.
like it's party time. So I can't wait till everybody can wipe their own butt is my next one. I'm so excited, you guys. I'm gonna throw a big rager. It's
Nice.
gonna be everybody
Yep.
can wipe their own butt. So little new normal change. There's so many changes in that newborn phase or just in that first year that even though you are going through this mourning process and this getting to know you process, you're also need to look at when there is a win, like please take the time to celebrate it.
Good
Even if
point.
it's just you being like, woo, that'll help that mental
It's a very
state
good
more than
point.
you think.
All right. I think we got one more slide.
Anything else anybody wants to talk about new normal, or are we ready to consider hiring a doula?
Oops. I went the wrong way. Sorry. Uh,
No, that's okay.
okay. Oh, nope. That's not it.
I know
There we go.
PowerPoints can't help
There we are.
themselves. They're like at the beginning.
There we are. All right. Yeah. So, what do we do to try and alleviate some of the issues that we talked about? Hire a doula.
Yeah.
Hire a doula. So, like we said, there were so many things that we went over to consider in our postpartum planning. And I would say the one thing that we want to do is, besides considering our time, is think about hiring a postpartum doula. Postpartum doulas are independent, um, tend to either work independently on their own or with an agency of some sort. And your doula has so much to offer you. So your doula can offer you resources that you may need, whether those resources have to do with maybe doing equipment rentals. Maybe those resources have to deal with education. Maybe those resources have to do with adding on different practitioners, whether that be like a pelvic floor therapist or a lactation consultant. We all know those people in the birth and postpartum world, and so we can always help you with those things. Maybe it's you are maybe lower income and need help with diapers, or you need help with getting formula. We know where those resources are, and we can help get those to you. Your postpartum doula is going to help you with that emotional and that physical transformation and that transition that you have to do. They're going to be able to help you with um, supporting not only yourself as the birthing person, but also your partner. And if you have any other people in the household that might need some support, doulas are not babysitters. So we don't just like watch your kid and then you go do whatever you want to do. We're there to help you. With your new normal, right? And so I always say that if I did my job right, then you're going to be able to go into the rest of your parenting journey with success, right? And everybody defines success differently, but basically I want you to be able to go in there confident and knowing that you can do this, right? Because there is so much going on in this postpartum period. Um, Postpartum doulas can help you set up your living space, and so making it functional so that you can get your needs done. They're going to help you with nutrition and meal planning. They can help with exercise, or even just helping you reallocate how maybe your time is used. Maybe you used to work nights and now you have this baby and now you want to work days. So helping you with those transitions as well. So there's so many things that a postpartum doula can do and to offer you. And honestly, your postpartum doulas tend to end up being part of the family. As a postpartum doula, there are so many families that I talk to years and years later. Literally got a picture of a baby that I worked with over 3 years ago. The parents always check in. Hey, just want to let you know, thank you so much. This is how old baby Johnny is now, and this is what he looks like, and we still talk about you to this day. So having that emotional, physical support during this very vulnerable point in your life is life changing and is something that I believe every person deserves. But that's why you should hire one of us. Anything to add to that, Chloe?
I like to, if you're hopefully planning correctly based on all of our incredible advice, um, it is absolutely possible to have a postpartum doula, even if it's just for those first couple of weeks. So it's like people are very well-meaning and want to support you. So utilize having a postpartum or birth doula fund or both. And instead of getting all this baby stuff that, as we talked about, a lot of times people don't end up using or needing. In reality, it's nice to have a fund of something that would actually be helpful as far as support, or if you can get it from family and spread it out well enough, great. But a lot of times that's not the case because everybody has, jobs and lives and things. So it's hard to get this level of support that's also unbiased because we're not embedded in that way. So,
We're not here to judge you.
yeah.
Oh, and to piggyback off of what Chloe was saying about cost of doulas, I would say that 90% of doulas will work with you based on your budget. So when you look at like how much a doulas cost in your area, you might think to yourself like, oh my gosh, that's way too much. Most doulas will work with you with your cost and be able to get what they're worth is. But maybe you do a payment plan. Maybe you do something like that. I would say 90% of doulas are open to working with the families because at the end of the day, we want everybody to just feel well supported in their postpartum journey. And so, like I said, 90% of us are going to help work with you with your budget. Or if you tell us this is your budget, we'll tell you like, this is the kind of care that you can get for that budget. So if you just search doulas online and you think to yourself, like, I can't afford that, um, just talk to a doula, interview a doula. They most likely will work with you. And also, that care of a doula is going to be worth way more than that $1,500 bassinet that you bought. Because it said your
Side
baby
note.
will sleep.
Yeah. But also if you have a network that's, if your surrounding familial and friend network is willing to contribute to a $1,500 bassinet, I'm sure that it can be reallocated
Yeah.
to something that would actually be helpful for you. So just know I'm hoping to make that more of a trend, like some of the things now, instead of on your baby registry, having it be lots of stuff. Some people will do diaper funds and they'll do like basically postpartum support funds. And so that's a great way to not only budget for you, because you can always interview with somebody, in your second trimester and give you enough time to set up something like a payment plan and make it more realistic for you, combined with support from friends and family. Be like, this, you want to support me in my
Yeah.
postpartum? This is the way that you can do it. And that can make it more attainable for people,
And I did that
That's
personally.
right?
So, because I wouldn't have been able to afford me.
Right? I wouldn't have been able to afford me either, but I purposely, I mean, I had the unique opportunity of having a baby during COVID, so everything came crashing down. But my intention was, the one thing I wanted was somebody to cover my postpartum doula care. And that would
well,
have been amazing in retrospect. And in
we
my
can even
scenario, very
advocate,
needed.
may not happen immediately, but the more of us that ask our insurance companies and our employers for this, that hopefully someday it will be part of every insurance plan and every employer's postpartum offerings or maternity.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And there's better ones coming out all around, there's still limited ones in the more the more mainstream insurance plans, right? They'll have doula support, but it'll be very limited and more so on the birth side than the
Sure.
postpartum side as far as support goes. But then there are things like Carrot, and there's another one. Is it like Prodigy? No, that's wrong.
Prodigy.
Is it Prodigy? Okay, wow. I got that right. But some of those are, I guess, either understand that type of care more, but again, it depends on the employer and it depends on if somebody knew about that ahead of time to pay into it and things like that. And so I guess
Right.
making those more
Totally
mainstream would
agree.
be incredible.
Well, Chloe, Raquel, thank you so much for your time today. And
Tell
I
everyone.
know this was super informative. I know other moms and support people and are going to be interested in watching this. We'll have more of these webinars coming down the line. We'll pick up some more topics. So you guys check back and make sure you see what other things we're going to talk about. Super excited about that. And if you're a doula, there is, we're going to have another webinar that's focused specifically on if you're a doula. So check back and listen to that one as well. Thank you again, and we'll talk to everybody soon.